it's a woman that she had met at a party. So she enters, she buys the book, she opens the book, but she's disappointed. Why? Let's read the reason. How Are We to Live is the book's title, a collection of stories, not a novel. This in itself is a disappointment. It seems to diminish the book's authority, making the author seem like somebody who's hanging on to the gates of literature, rather than safely settled inside. So here we read some sort of prejudice against the literary genre of the short story. A genre that, especially in opposition to the novel, is considered a marginal form, a liminal form, a minor form. Okay? This position, this some sort of hostility that we can see is expressed inside a short story, is also presented by Alice Munro in her interviews, essays, so in other pieces of writing. Let's see what she writes in the introduction to a collection of short stories she has published in 1996. I did not choose to write short stories. I hope to write novels again. When you are responsible for running a house and taking care of small children, particularly in the days before disposable diapers or ubiquitous automatic washing machines, it's hard to arrange for long chunks of time. Oh, so it looks as if it were an understatement of the minuzio. Okay, she says, oh, I didn't have the time to write a novel, but I absolutely wanted to write novels. Alice Munro married when she was very young, at 22 years old. She had her first baby when she was 22. She married at 21, her first baby. She has had her first baby when she was 22. So, very young. Okay, then she had other two children. So, she didn't have the time to write. So, it's some sort of, she presents the choice of the short story as some sort of a compromise, not as a choice. She wanted to write novels. She hoped to write novels. Dale Jordan, who's the protagonist of her second collection of stories, also is expressing this wish, this longing for a novel, and says, the only thing that I want to do in my life is to write a novel. Which novel in particular? A Gothic novel. Dale Jordan, the protagonist of this second collection of stories, wants to write a Gothic novel on Jubilee. What is Jubilee? It is the literary transposition counterpart of Wingham, a small town in rural Ontario, southwestern Ontario, not far from Toronto, where Alice Munro was born in 1931. Okay, so 82 years old. But we have to accept the fact that Dale Jordan, the protagonist of the second collection of stories, was not able to write a novel. And as Dale Jordan, Alice Munro as well has experienced this failure. She has not been able to write a novel, even though editors and publishers kept pushing her towards this form. Why? Because first of all, short stories don't sell. First of all, for a market reason. Okay? It's easier publish, to promote, and to sell a novel. And secondly, because the short story is not recognized as a legitimate, as an authoritative, piece of writing. It's considered, as we have said before, a minor form, a liminal, a marginal form, if compared to the novel. So, this anxiety for not being able to produce a novel has resulted in Alice Munro in a depression, in panic attacks, okay, especially in the 50s, but till the 70s. So she has really suffered from this inability to produce a novel. And in fact, she hasn't been able to produce it. She's only written short stories, and for that failure, the Nobel Academy has decided to celebrate her as the master of the contemporary short story. Okay, so Alice Munro has been awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature this year. Paradoxically, ironically, if you want, precisely for this failure. You know, we have read in the newspaper that they have called her the phone. She was not there, so they have left a message on the answering machine. So imagine you don't have an answering machine, you have your iPhone, but imagine you open the answering machine and you have Peter Englund telling you, "Good morning, Mrs. Munro. I wish to, tell you that you have been awarded with the Nobel Prize for Literature." Oh, very unusual message on the answering machine, okay? She has published her first short story in 1950, when she was 19 years old, and she was attending university. She was only able to attend the University of Western Ontario for 2 years. The years that her grandship lasted, because she was very poor, okay? But because of her merits, she has been given a grandship, and the grandship only lasted 2 years. So after the 2 years, she had to leave university. Then she married, then she had 3 children, as we have said. And after this first publication at 19, she has started publishing short stories in Canadian magazines. But starting from 1976, she has started publishing her short stories in the New Yorker, the most important US literary magazine. Okay, so that year marks her success, her legitimation, the recognition that Alice Munro writes wonderful short stories. The New Yorker is crucially important for that. Okay, so how does Alice Munro see the form of the short story? What is her vision, perspective, definition of this genre? Let's see an essay that she herself has written on that. "I don't take a story to follow as if it were a road, taking me somewhere." So we don't have a straightforward, linear, vision as for the development of narration is concerned, with views and mid diversions along the way. I go into it and move back and forth and settle here and there and stay in it for a while. It's more like a house, and the house is the image she offers in order to configure her narrative vision. Okay, the short story as a house. Everybody knows what a house does. How it encloses space and makes connections between one enclosed space and another, and presents what is outside in a new way. This is the nearest I can come to explaining what a story does for me, and what I want my stories to do for other people. Okay, so here we see that she refuses a straightforward linear approach. On the contrary, she opens a more entangled perspective and more interactive. Okay, so obviously the house has a structure. Okay, so the story has a structure, undoubtedly. But Alice Munro, in describing the story as an image for the house as an image for the short story, is more interested in the movement, in the interconnections among the spaces, and in the have this shifting perspective, these fragments, okay, ever-changing fragments and fragmentary visions of the short story. What is interesting is that, okay, this is her vision, but she is not considered the master of the short story because she has found the formula, the way a short story is to be written. Okay, we are not in medical fields, chemical fields, physical fields in which you discover the formula and that is the solution to the problem. On the contrary, she has been awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature as a master of the contemporary short story because she keeps reinventing, redefining, reconfiguring the short story form, okay, throughout the years. Throughout the decades, she has produced 14 collections of stories, okay, and she has kept reinventing the structure, characterization, setting, and development. Her short stories have become more and more complex, elusive, fragmented. At the very beginning, the first collection offered 15 short stories, very short ones, centered upon a restricted number of characters, easily recognizable narrative lines, so the reader could easily follow the development of narration, and a temporal narrative development. On the contrary, the following instances, the following configurations of narrative have made the narration more and more entangled, complex, longer, going towards the novella, which is another formula you will know. Okay, so she has kept exploring new configurations of the narrative genre. Then, with the view from Castle Rock, she has also devoted her attention to historiographic research. She has done research into archives in order to write stories on the history of her family coming from Scotland and migrating to Canada. Okay, so the history of her family being told into stories. So some sort of, hybrid solutions. Castle Rock, for those of you who don't know, is the rock where the Edinburgh Castle is built. Okay, and little Andrew, the young protagonist, was brought up there by his father, who had told him, "Look, Andrew, from the castle, the Edinburgh Castle. Look up there, you can see the sea, and beyond the sea you have America." Obviously no Canada, no one knows what is Canada, no one knew. Okay, everything was America. And you're going to go there. And there was some sort of prophecy, because Andrew migrate there and settle in Canada. But then you have your life, that is an autobiographical form of writing. Okay, so we have seen that Alice Munro, throughout these collections, the 14 collections she has published, has kept reinventing themes, topics, okay, the material for her narrative, and modes and forms of narration. And for that, she is the master of the short story. Okay, because she has kept working in a critical, productive way on this formula. So, we have seen that she has been celebrated as the master of the short story because she has kept reinventing modes and forms. But you know that the most important element in a piece of literary writing is obviously the style, is the language she uses. I really like quoting a metaphor that has been offered by Piperno on Il Sole 24 Ore while celebrating Alice Munro. Perfect short stories is how he has defined them. And he has said, while on holiday, for example, let's say a couple of weeks on holiday, you can have some weak moments in which you get bored, you waste your time, you have some, accidents and so on. But if you are on a weekend, everything is to be perfect. So obviously you have a clear comparison between the long holiday and the weekend. And the weekend necessarily has to be perfect. Oh, wonderful. So the same happens here. In a short story, everything is to be perfectly polished, cared for, accurately written. Okay, the same we have here. So let's see, let's have a direct contact with Munro's style. Here we are going to see the description of Jubilee. That is, we have already mentioned that the counterpart of Wingham, let's say the representation of the city, of the small town where Alice Munro was born in 1931. The life in Jubilee is practically seasonal. Deaths occur in the winter, marriages are celebrated in the summer. There is good reason for this. The winters are long and full of hardship, and the autumn week cannot always get to them. Now I need your help. Can you help me in order to describe this style? Which kind of writing do we have? Comments? Whatever. I'm sure you have observations because it's yes, simple. It's a simple writing. What does that mean? What is simple? What do you find simple? Perfect. Okay, sentence construction. Okay, the way syntax is constructed. You don't have hypotaxis, you don't have, subordination, entangled, complex sentence structure. You have simple, okay? You can really follow these sentences. What else? It's not only syntax, which is simple in Alice Munro's writing. We also have a simple, yes, language. Language is a general term. Language in terms of perfect, vocabulary, what choice, rate. We don't have complex. We don't need to look words up into the dictionary. We know them. So, simple syntax, simple vocabulary, accessible style. So, Munro uses a very simple, accessible language, a very accessible style. In order to what? In order to describe everyday life, everyday events, in order to explore the inner feelings of girls and women. That is the title of one of her collections. Because Munro is obsessed with entering the mind, the soul, okay, of her women. Let's read a passage from a story that you have read, Red Dress. We have a teenager protagonist, so the narrative is focalized on her viewpoint. It's a first-person narration, and she is very anxious because she has a bad relationship with, school environment. she never feels at ease. So let's see how Alice Munro describes this anxiety, this feeling of uneasiness. At high school, I was never comfortable for a minute. I didn't know about learning. Before an exam, she got icy hands and palpitations, but in class, any simple little question at all, my voice was apt to come out squeaky, or else hoarse and trembling. When I had to go to the blackboard, I was sure, even at the time of the month when this could not be true, that I had blood on my skirt. My hands became slippery with sweat when they were required to work the blackboard compass. I could not hit the ball in volleyball. Being called upon to perform an action in front of others made all my reflexes come undone. So I'm sure you have comments. So here we have a description of some particular feelings. But can you help me? Can you tell me what you feel? How you feel this style, this description of feelings, of inner feelings? Before, in the Jubilee passage, we had some sort of detached style, okay? Winter, okay, dead, weak people. Here, what do we have when she describes inner feelings? She goes deep, okay? Don't you feel that she's able to capture many shades, okay? Many deep aspects of this anxiety. Think that in 2007, a conference was organized in Florence, not by a literary circle, but by psychologists, and they have devoted the entire conference to Alice Munro. That is very unusual, because obviously those are people who are interested in the clinical side, you know, the disease. On the contrary, they have decided to devote an entire conference to a writer, because they have recognized that she's really able to explore the complexity of the mind. Okay, from a literary viewpoint. And that is really amazing, because that's very unusual. Okay, and here we can really feel, we can really touch, we can really taste this ability to go deep into the complexity, into the power, okay, of the human mind. But then, we only have this kind. First, the detached style that we have seen before. Here we have this deep, intense, emotional style. Many other times, we have a lighter tone. We're going to see a passage in which the protagonist, Alfreda, a family furnishings, another story, in which we have a woman who writes a letter to a female magazine. Okay? Let's see the style, and pay attention because I want you to comment on that. Dear Morning Star, eczema is a dreadful pest, especially in the hot weather we are having, and I hope the baking soda does some good. Home treatment certainly ought to be respected, but it never hurts to seek out your doctor's advice. It's splendid news to hear your hubby is up and about again. It can't have been any fun with both of you under the weather. The hubby is a term for a husband. It's a very colloquial term. Okay, so can you help me? How would you define this style, this register. Yes, very ironic, very... Do we have a formal register? No, absolutely not. A very informal, colloquial. Okay, so hub, for example, is a very informal term. Perfect. So, think that Susanna Basso, who's Alice Munro's translator for Einaudi, in particular for the Super Ferrari series, the most important, prestigious series, okay, by Einaudi. Susanna Basso has read that in order to translate some passages of Munro, she had to read the Bible. For other passages, she had to read Confidenze, Intimità, some particular female magazines which use a very colloquial, informal tone. Okay? So what I want to say is that Alice Munro's style is far from being easy to label, to define. In fact, San Pietro, who's a very important scholar who has studied Munro in Italy, keeps saying, please pay attention to the fact that in Munro you have a fake simplicity. Okay, so you can think that it's simple, but if you read the stories, you understand that it's very complex. It's very polyphonic. What is polyphonic? Can you help me with this polyphonic style? Many voices, you have the juxtaposition, the interaction of different tones, different styles. So we understand that it's more complex, more elusive. You can not easily define it. Okay, so we have seen that Munro keeps rewriting or keeps revising the short story genre, keeps using different styles, different tones, different registers. But she's also fascinated by what is told, by what is narrated, by the topic of narration. Okay? And in particular, by the rewriting of elements, but by how the mind and the voice change events. Okay? Whenever you tell a story about, for example, your holiday, about a Saturday night that you have had, you don't technically, objectively narrate it. Obviously, you manipulate it because you select some items. If you have to tell how you spent your Saturday night to your mum, you are unlikely to use the same story that you use here with your friends telling about your Saturday night, okay? And not only because you omit, which is what I'm sure you do, but also because you insert your emotional involvement, different levels, okay, and you weigh narration in a different way. So it's not only the monastic side, because you cannot remember everything. Obviously, that's impossible from a cognitive viewpoint. But also because the emotional involvement implies, different processes of omission, selection, recollection, and narration. Okay? So this is what Alice Munro is basically interested in memory. She starts from exploring how memory works from a cognitive viewpoint. And this happens in a very important story, The Bear Came Over the Mountain, that has been adapted as a movie. The title is Away from Her, in Italian Lontano da lei. The director is Sarah Polley, and the main protagonist is Julie Christie. She had 2 nominations for the Oscars, so a very important movie that has been celebrated. This movie deals with Alzheimer. What is Alzheimer? Can you help me? Yeah? Yeah, perfect. Okay, it's a disease which is concerned with the loss of your memory. Okay, and here we have the female protagonist, Fiona, who progressively loses her memory. But how does Alice Munro describe this? She never mentions Alzheimer in the story. She never describes clinical symptoms from a clinical viewpoint, so using clinical medical language. Let's see how she does that. Using snapshots, fragments. And actually remember, she was using this idea of the fragment. The everyday language. Over a year ago, Grant and his Fiona's husband started noticing so many little yellow notes stuck out all over the house. Worse things were coming. She went to town and phoned him from a booth to ask him how to drive home. She went for her walk across the field into the woods and came home by the fence line. A very long way round. She said that she'd counted on faces always taking you somewhere. It was hard to figure out. She said that about fences as if it was a joke, and as she had remembered the phone number without any trouble. She would stand in doorways trying to figure out where she was going. She forgot to turn on the burner under the vegetables or put water in the coffee maker. So you see, you have some sort of snapshots, pics, okay? Not a detailed medical description of the development of Alzheimer, but she captures some ordinary everyday fragments from everyday life. But from here you can easily and efficiently recognize the symptoms. Okay, so this identification of the clinical signs of the disease are only a first step for Munro in her exploration of memory. Because memory in her narrative is a character, is a protagonist. It shapes life, it shapes narration. And here, for example, we have a passage from Open Secrets, in which we can really see how memory goes into the narrative line, is a protagonist. In kitchens, hundreds and thousands of miles away, she watched the soft skin form of the back of a wooden spoon. A wooden spoon, a very domestic object, simple object, everyday object. And her memory will twitch, but it will not quite reveal to her this moment when she seems to be looking into an open secret. Something not startling until you think you're trying to tell it. And the key word here, obviously, is memory, because memory enters the narration and frames is the protagonist, the element that shapes narration, that shapes the story. And the point is trying to tell it. The telling of secrets, the telling of memory is the point, is the central element in Munro's narration. So memory is the most important thing in Munro's writing, and the topic, the object of memory, par excellence, the most important one, is the mother. The mother. Alice Munro has lost her mother when she was very young, 28 years old, but the mother had suffered from Parkinson's disease for 20 years. So she has really seen the development of the disease. So her writing is concerned with the recovery of the image of the mother. The recovery of the image of the mother with the disease, but before the disease. Okay? She was not yet affected by the symptoms. Let's see how she is able to represent that. First, I wish to share with you an excerpt showing how she uses the dream as a mediator for voluntary memory in order to remember the image of the mother before the disease. My mother, during the summer, would have been 41 or 42 years old, I think, somewhere around the age that I am now. Just her left forearm trembled. The hand trembled more than the arm. The thumb knocked ceaselessly against the palm. She did, however, hide it in her fingers, and she could hold the arm still by stiffening it against her body. So we have this intense image showing one of the most visible symptoms of Parkinson, and the attempt, the mother, not to show it, okay, to hide this tremor. Then we have the description of this dream in which she's able to see the figure of her mother, not so much affected by the disease. She would be looking quite well, not exactly youthful, but entirely untouched by the paralyzing disease that held her in its grip for a decade or more before her death. But so much better that I remember that I would be astonished. Oh, I just have this little tremor in my arm, she would say, and a little stiffness up the side of my face, okay? It's a nuisance, but I get round. I recovered then what in waking life I had lost. My mother's likeness of face and voice before her throat muscles stiffened, and the woeful impersonal mask fastened itself over her features. Okay, so she's really able to capture the image of the mother before the disease and before the symptoms really signaled the disease on the face, on the body of the mother. But what is important is that she goes beyond physical symptoms, and she recovers the love of the mother for storytelling. In her stories, she keeps saying that her mother really liked narrating stories, but she kept changing elements, adding details, beautifying traits, exaggerating everything. Okay, so she keeps saying, oh, she's not faithful, she's an unreliable narrator, because she keeps manipulating plots, tones, traits, etc. And in this wonderful story, on the contrary, she decides to give voice to her mother. Okay, so the memory of the mother is not taken as the recovery of traits of memories, but as a gift. She decides to use the space of the short story to give it to the mother for her to tell her story. Okay, so she enables her mother to tell her story. So we have this, the next story, which is entitled Friend of My Youth, and which starts from the dream of her mother, that tells a story told by the mother. Okay, it's some sort of a joke. So she starts saying that the mother is unreliable because she keeps changing narratives. But then she decides to tell a story told by her mother when she was young. And then she goes on saying, this is what she would say, but I would say this. So we have a wonderful story in which we have different voices, different perspectives, but we don't know the starting point. Because the filter is the mother who's unreliable. But then we know that it's a story written by the narrator. Okay, so a very complex cycle of rewriting. And this is memory. and Alice Munro. If I could have been a writer, and here we have the mother, I do think I could have been a writer then. I would have written the story of Flora's life, and do you know what I would have called it? The Maiden Lady. She would make her into a noble figure. That is the viewpoint of the mother. She would change, the protagonist, and make it noble. One who accepts defection, treachery, who forgives and stands aside, not once but twice. Never a moment of complaint. On the contrary, she decides to react. She doesn't like this noble figure, this white narrative. I have my own ideas about Flora's story. I do not think that I could have written a novel, but that I would write one. I would take a different tack. I saw my mother's story and put in what she left out. My Flora saw an alternative story, an alternative version, would be as black, as hers was white, rejoicing in the bad turns done to her and in her own forgiveness, spying in the shambles of her sister's life. A Presbyterian witch, reading out of her poisonous book. And so here we have memory, okay? Not, or only partially, as the recovery of things past, of memories, but in the narration of a story, in the rewriting, in the exploration of how we tell stories and keep changing them. And in this, she recovers the mother, because she gives the gift of memory to her mother. She welcomes the mother into the narration, okay, and co-produces the story with her, okay? And with this image, I really thank you for your attention.